My name is Brooke Sullivan. I'm 35 years old, and I had just spent 12 years building a successful career in commercial real estate investment to purchase my dream home through strategic property deals and disciplined financial planning, only to have my parents, Howard and Janet, arrive at my doorstep, demanding I hand over my keys for the family, just 3 days after they had purchased my 32-year-old brother, Travis, a $950,000 house that he had done absolutely nothing to earn or deserve. What made this confrontation infinitely more devastating was the moment when I refused their outrageous demand, and my father's open-handed slap sent me reeling backward into my own foyer, while 6 extended family members watched in complete silence, apparently believing I should sacrifice the property I had worked over a decade to afford for parents who had just given nearly $1 million to my financially irresponsible sibling. What my parents didn't know was that their willingness to commit physical assault, rather than accept responsibility for their catastrophic financial planning and obvious favoritism, had just triggered a comprehensive investigation into how they had actually financed Travis's nearly $1 million house purchase. Because my contacts in real estate finance were about to uncover irregularities that suggested potential fraud, illegal asset transfers, and tax evasion that would transform their violent demand into criminal charges far beyond just assault. The commercial real estate career that had enabled me to purchase my own home through strategic investments and professional expertise had begun 12 years earlier when I started as an entry-level property management assistant, learning the fundamentals of real estate operations, tenant relations, and building maintenance that would later inform my investment decisions. My path into commercial real estate had been motivated by fascination with property investment, as wealth-building strategy and career interest in the complex financial transactions that characterized commercial property deals, creating opportunities for income generation through strategic purchases and property management. Commercial real estate offers multiple income streams through property appreciation, rental income, and strategic sales. My first mentor, Richard Hayes, had explained during my early career years, and understanding property valuation, market trends, and financial structuring creates advantages for building investment portfolios. The entry-level property management work had been demanding but educational, requiring long hours handling tenant complaints, coordinating building maintenance, and learning the operational aspects of commercial property management that most investors never fully understood. Property management experience gives investors crucial knowledge about operational costs, tenant behavior, and building systems, Richard had emphasized, and that operational understanding creates better investment decisions than financial analysis alone can provide. My advancement from property management assistant to investment analyst had required additional education in real estate finance, market analysis, and property valuation techniques that would enable me to identify undervalued properties and strategic investment opportunities. The investment analyst position had provided exposure to commercial property transactions, financial modeling, and due diligence processes that revealed how successful investors identified opportunities and structured deals that generated returns through both rental income and property appreciation. Investment analysis requires understanding not just current property values, but future market trends, my senior analyst supervisor had taught me, and identifying properties that are currently undervalued but positioned for appreciation requires both financial skills and market intuition. My transition from investment analyst to active property investor had been carefully planned over several years, building capital through aggressive saving, studying successful investment strategies, and identifying my first property purchase that would launch my investment portfolio. The first investment property I purchased was a small commercial building requiring renovations, purchased at below market value because most investors weren't willing to manage the renovation complexity or deal with the tenant displacement issues that upgrading would require. Distressed properties offer opportunities for investors willing to manage renovation projects, I had calculated when evaluating my first purchase, and the forced appreciation through strategic improvements can generate returns that exceed what passive property appreciation would provide. The renovation project had been challenging, requiring coordination with contractors, management of budget constraints, and handling tenant relations during construction periods, but the completed improvements had increased property value by 40% within 18 months. The success of my first investment had provided both financial returns and operational experience that informed subsequent property purchases, gradually building a portfolio of commercial properties that generated rental income while appreciating in value through strategic improvements and favorable market trends. Brooks' investment strategy combines operational expertise with financial analysis, industry colleagues would observe, and her ability to identify properties that other investors overlook has created a portfolio that generates consistent income while building equity. My investment portfolio had grown over 12 years to include 7 commercial properties across different sectors, generating rental income that exceeded my living expenses while building equity that represented substantial net worth accumulated through strategic investment rather than salary income alone. The home I had purchased for my personal residence was a beautiful property in an established neighborhood, purchased through conventional financing that my investment income and credit history had made easily accessible, representing both personal achievement and strategic real estate investment. The purchase price of $675,000 had been substantial but manageable given my investment income and property equity, creating a living situation that reflected both my professional success and my appreciation for quality residential real estate. Your personal residence purchase demonstrates sound financial planning, my mortgage broker had confirmed, because your investment income provides stable cash flow, while your property portfolio creates equity that supports borrowing capacity. The decision to maintain my personal residence separately from my investment properties had been strategic, ensuring that my living situation wasn't affected by investment property issues while maintaining the home as personal space, rather than treating it as business asset. But while I was building my real estate career and investment portfolio through 12 years of strategic work, my brother Travis had been cycling through failed business ventures, financial crises, and ongoing dependence on parental support that subsidized his lifestyle, without ever requiring him to develop financial responsibility or career stability. Travis's pattern of business failures had begun in his early 20s when he convinced our parents to fund his first business venture, a restaurant concept that failed within 8 months due to his lack of industry experience and poor financial management. Travis just needs the right opportunity, Howard and Janet would explain when relatives questioned why they continued funding failed ventures. And we believe in supporting our children's entrepreneurial spirit even when their early attempts don't succeed. The characterization of systematic business failures as entrepreneurial spirit revealed my parents' fundamental inability to distinguish between genuine business potential and Travis's pattern of pursuing ideas without adequate planning, capital, or industry knowledge. Each failed business venture had been followed by parental financial bailouts that covered Travis's debts, living expenses, and startup capital for his next ill-conceived project, creating a cycle where failure had no consequences and success was never required for continued financial support. Travis is learning valuable lessons from his business experiences, Janet would claim, and eventually he'll find the right opportunity that matches his talents and creates the success we know he's capable of achieving. But the valuable lessons that Travis was supposedly learning never translated into improved business judgment, financial responsibility, or career stability that might have justified the hundreds of thousands of dollars my parents had invested in his various failed ventures. My own relationship with Howard and Janet had been characterized by their expectation that I should be completely self-sufficient, while Travis received comprehensive financial support, creating obvious favoritism that positioned Travis as deserving special assistance while I was expected to succeed without family help. "You're so capable and independent, Brooke," Howard would say when I asked for help during my early career years. "But Travis needs our support because he's still finding his way professionally." The differential treatment extended beyond just financial support to include emotional validation, with Travis's failures being treated as learning experiences worthy of encouragement, while my actual successes were acknowledged briefly before conversation returned to Travis's latest venture or crisis. Have you ever watched your parents invest hundreds of thousands of dollars in your siblings' failures while expecting you to achieve success entirely independently? then have them show up demanding you sacrifice what you earned? That's exactly what was about to happen, as Howard and Janet's most outrageous expression of favoritism would reveal the extent to which they valued Travis's comfort over my achievements and boundaries. The confrontation that would expose their willingness to use violence to enforce their expectations was approaching, and their demands would be so audacious that criminal prosecution and financial investigation would be the only appropriate responses. The shocking revelation about Howard and Janet's latest financial decision came through a Facebook post from Travis that appeared 3 days before their arrival at my home, announcing with obvious pride and entitlement that he was now the owner of a $950,000 house that our parents had purchased for him. New house! Thanks, Mom and Dad, for the amazing gift, Travis had posted alongside photos of a substantial property in an upscale neighborhood, clearly showing a house that represented nearly $1 million in real estate value, given without any requirement that Travis contribute financially or demonstrate he could maintain such expensive property. The post had generated numerous comments from relatives expressing congratulations, mixed with obvious curiosity about how Howard and Janet had financed such an expensive gift, especially since their own financial situation had never suggested they had nearly $1 million available for property purchases. "Your parents are so generous," one relative had commented. "That's an incredible gift and shows how much they believe in supporting family members during important life stages." But the generous gift narrative obscured the reality that Travis was 32 years old, with a history of failed business ventures, and no stable income or career foundation that would enable him to maintain expensive property through property taxes, insurance, maintenance, and utilities that substantial homes require. "I can't believe your parents bought Travis a house worth nearly $1 million, my friend Patricia said when she saw the Facebook post, especially after all the money they've already given him for failed businesses. Where did they get that kind of money? The question about financing sources was exactly what I had been wondering, because Howard and Janet's financial situation, as I understood it, didn't include liquid assets approaching $1 million that could be used for property purchases, suggesting they had either accessed funds I wasn't aware of or had structured the purchase through financing arrangements that might have legal or tax implications. My parents sold their investment property, I learned through a conversation with my Aunt Linda. They had been holding it for years, and they sold it to get the money for Travis's house purchase. The revelation that Howard and Janet had liquidated their own investment property to fund Travis's house meant they had eliminated their own real estate equity and income stream to give Travis property he hadn't earned, while apparently not considering how this would affect their own financial security or retirement planning. "They sold their investment property to buy Travis a house?" I asked, confirming what seemed like incomprehensibly poor financial planning. "What are they planning to live on for retirement if they've liquidated their assets to give Travis property?" "They didn't really explain their long-term planning," Linda admitted. "They just said Travis deserves security and home ownership even if he hasn't been able to afford it himself yet." The characterization of giving nearly $1 million to a 32-year-old with no stable income as providing security revealed fundamental misunderstanding of what financial security actually means and how it's created through earned stability rather than gifted assets. But what I didn't yet understand was that Howard and Janet's catastrophic financial planning was about to become my problem, as they had apparently decided that their solution to having given everything to Travis was to take my home for themselves, treating my 12 years of work as family resource available for redistribution. 3 days after Travis's Facebook announcement about his new house, Howard and Janet arrived at my home unannounced, accompanied by 6 extended family members whose presence suggested they had planned this confrontation as public intervention designed to pressure me into compliance through social dynamics and family expectations. "Brooke, we need to talk to you about something important," Howard said as I opened the door to find my parents and 6 relatives standing on my porch. "And we brought family members because this affects everyone, and we need you to understand how serious this situation is." The formal delegation and serious tone immediately triggered my concern, because unannounced family interventions usually signaled that unreasonable demands were about to be presented as family obligations I was expected to fulfill regardless of my own interests or boundaries. "We gave Travis his house," Janet explained as the group entered my living room without invitation. "And we need your house now because we sold our investment property to finance his purchase and we don't have anywhere else to live." The casual way she announced that they needed my house because they had given nearly $1 million to Travis was so absurd that I initially thought she was joking or testing my reaction. But her serious expression and Howard's supportive nodding made it clear this was a genuine demand they expected me to fulfill. "You want my house because you gave everything to Travis?" I asked, making sure I understood the magnitude of what they were demanding. "The home I worked 12 years to afford through my real estate investment career? You can find another place to live," Howard replied dismissively. "But we need somewhere to stay after giving Travis his house, and your property is perfect for our needs." The characterization of my home as perfect for their needs, while completely ignoring that it was my property earned through 12 years of work, revealed their fundamental view that my achievements were family resources available for their use, regardless of my own plans or boundaries. "Travis deserves security and home ownership," Janet added. "And you're successful enough to afford another property, so this is the fair solution that helps everyone in the family." The twisted logic that fairness required me to sacrifice my home because they had given nearly $1 million to Travis exposed the favoritism that had characterized my entire relationship with my parents, but escalated to a level I had never imagined possible. "I'm not giving anyone my house," I said firmly. "You made a choice to give Travis expensive property, and the consequences of that choice are your responsibility, not mine." The direct refusal of their demand created immediate tension in the room, as Howard's face reddened with anger, and the assembled family members shifted uncomfortably, apparently having been told I would comply once family pressure was applied. "Brooke, you're being incredibly selfish," one of my aunts said, apparently having been recruited to support my parents' position. "Your parents need somewhere to live, and you have this house that you could share or transfer to help family members who are struggling." The characterization of my home ownership as selfishness, while Travis's receipt of a $950,000 gift was treated as deserved, revealed the distorted family values that made this intervention possible. "You're going to give us those keys," Howard said with threatening emphasis, moving closer to me in a way that felt physically intimidating. "Because we need this house, and you're going to help your family instead of being selfish about property." The escalation from request to demand, accompanied by physical intimidation, was creating an atmosphere that felt dangerous, as Howard's anger and the silent support from family members suggested they believed violence might be acceptable if I continued refusing their demands. "I'm not giving anyone anything," I repeated, feeling my own anger rising at their outrageous demands and their refusal to accept responsibility for their own catastrophic financial planning. What happened next occurred with such sudden violence that I barely had time to process the assault, before feeling the sharp pain across my face and stumbling backward into my foyer wall, as Howard's open-handed slap connected with enough force to cause immediate physical pain and disorientation. "You will give us this house," Howard repeated after striking me, apparently believing that physical violence would force my compliance with demands that verbal pressure had failed to achieve. The 6 family members who had accompanied my parents watched this assault in complete silence, with no one intervening to defend me or objecting to the violence they had just witnessed, creating a social atmosphere that suggested they believed Howard's assault was acceptable family conflict resolution. Janet's response to witnessing her husband physically assault their daughter was not to intervene or object, but to support his violence by immediately attacking me verbally for the refusal that had triggered Howard's criminal behavior. "You're being cruel and selfish," Janet said while I stood there with my face burning from Howard's slap. "We gave everything to Travis, and now we need your help, but you won't sacrifice anything for family members who need your support." The characterization of property retention as cruelty while they had just committed assault revealed the twisted values that had made this entire confrontation possible. Have you ever been physically assaulted by a parent while extended family members watched in silence? All because you refused to give away property you worked 12 years to earn after they gave nearly $1 million to your sibling. The pain of the slap was exceeded only by the realization that my parents were willing to commit violence to avoid accepting responsibility for their favoritism and catastrophic financial planning. But their assumption that assault would force my compliance had just triggered legal protocols and financial investigations that would expose not just the violence, but also the suspicious circumstances of how they had actually financed Travis's nearly $1 million house purchase. The moment of devastating clarity following Howard's assault was also the moment I realized that continuing this confrontation or attempting family mediation would be both dangerous and pointless, because people willing to commit physical violence to steal your home after giving nearly $1 million to your sibling don't deserve negotiation. They deserve criminal prosecution and comprehensive financial investigation. Standing there with my face burning from Howard's slap, while my family watched expectantly for me to comply with their demands, I made the calculated decision to leave immediately and activate both legal proceedings for the assault and financial investigations into how they had actually acquired the funds to purchase Travis a $950,000 house. "I'm leaving," I said calmly, moving toward my bedroom to collect my phone, wallet, and keys, while my family remained in the living room, apparently believing I was going to return with property documents they expected me to sign. "You're not leaving until you give us access to this house," Howard said, following me toward the bedroom in an apparent attempt to physically prevent my departure or continue the confrontation he had started with violence. "If you touch me again, you'll be arrested for assault," I replied, pulling out my phone while maintaining distance from Howard, who appeared ready to escalate the violence if I continued refusing their demands. The warning about arrest seemed to surprise Howard, who had apparently not considered that domestic violence committed in front of multiple witnesses might have legal consequences beyond just family conflict that could be smoothed over through time or family pressure. "Brooke, don't make this a legal situation," Janet called after me. "We're just trying to work out fair family arrangements after we gave Travis his house. There's no need to involve police or lawyers in family matters. The characterization of assault as family matters that shouldn't involve legal authorities revealed their complete lack of understanding about violence consequences, and their assumption that family relationships somehow exempted them from criminal prosecution. I didn't respond to their continued demands or justifications, instead focusing on reaching my car in the driveway where I could safely document the assault, contact authorities, and begin the legal and financial investigation processes that would ensure Howard faced criminal consequences while exposing the suspicious circumstances of Travis's house purchase. The drive to my attorney's office gave me time to process what had just occurred and to begin making the strategic calls that would activate both criminal prosecution for Howard's assault and financial investigations into how my parents had actually financed a $950,000 house purchase that seemed inconsistent with their documented income and assets. "Sandra, I need to file assault charges against my father and initiate financial fraud investigations," I explained to my attorney during the emergency consultation I had requested. "And I have 6 witnesses who observed the violence plus suspicions about how my parents financed a nearly $1 million property purchase for my brother." My attorney, Sandra Mitchell, immediately understood the dual nature of the legal situation. The assault required immediate criminal reporting, while the suspicious financing suggested potential fraud, tax evasion, or illegal asset transfers that warranted investigation by financial authorities. "We'll file police reports about the assault immediately," Sandra confirmed, "and I'll contact associates who specialize in financial fraud investigations to examine how your parents actually financed your brother's house purchase." The financial investigation aspect was crucial, because my knowledge of Howard and Janet's financial situation suggested they shouldn't have had liquid assets approaching $1 million available for property purchases, meaning they had either accessed funds through questionable means or had structured the transaction in ways that might violate tax laws or financial regulations. Real estate transactions involving substantial gifts often have tax implications, Sandra explained, and if your parents structured the purchase to avoid gift taxes or used questionable financing methods, there could be significant legal consequences beyond just the assault charges. The comprehensive nature of the legal response I was initiating would ensure that Howard faced immediate consequences for his violence, while also exposing whether their favoritism toward Travis had involved illegal financial activities that warranted prosecution. My professional contacts in real estate finance were equally helpful when I explained the situation and requested assistance investigating how Howard and Janet had actually financed Travis's house purchase. A $950,000 property purchase as a gift raises immediate questions about financing sources and tax reporting, explained Marcus, a real estate finance specialist I had worked with on commercial property transactions, and I can connect you with investigators who specialize in examining suspicious real estate transactions. The financial community's interest in investigating the transaction was motivated partly by professional curiosity about unusual financing arrangements, but also by concern that if fraud or illegal transfers were involved, it could affect broader real estate market integrity and regulatory compliance. I'll need documentation about your parents' financial history, Marcus continued, including their income sources, asset holdings, and any recent large transactions that might explain how they acquired nearly $1 million for a property gift. The documentation I could provide about Howard and Janet's financial situation would help investigators identify discrepancies between their documented resources and the substantial property purchase they had somehow financed, potentially revealing fraud, unreported income, or illegal asset transfers. 3 weeks after initiating both criminal prosecution for Howard's assault and financial investigations into Travis's house purchase financing, I received updates that suggested the legal and financial consequences were beginning to materialize in ways that validated my decision to pursue comprehensive accountability. The assault charges are proceeding with strong evidence from multiple witnesses, Sandra reported, and Howard will be facing criminal prosecution that could result in conviction, probation, and mandatory anger management depending on his criminal history and case specifics. But the more interesting developments were emerging from the financial investigations, which were uncovering irregularities in how Howard and Janet had actually financed Travis's nearly $1 million house purchase. Financial investigators are finding discrepancies in your parents' tax returns, Marcus informed me, including unreported income from their investment property sale and potential gift tax violations in how they structured Travis's house purchase. The preliminary findings suggested that Howard and Janet might have evaded taxes on their investment property sale proceeds and failed to properly report the substantial gift to Travis, creating potential criminal tax evasion charges in addition to Howard's assault prosecution. There are also questions about whether they used mortgage fraud to finance part of the purchase, Marcus continued, because the transaction structure suggests they may have misrepresented their financial situation to obtain financing that wouldn't have been approved with accurate income and asset disclosure. The possibility of mortgage fraud added another layer of potential criminal charges, because lying on mortgage applications to obtain financing constitutes federal crimes that carry serious penalties, including imprisonment and substantial fines. 4 weeks after the assault and the initiation of financial investigations, I received the phone call that would confirm my suspicions about the illegal nature of how Howard and Janet had financed Travis's house purchase. Ms. Sullivan, this is Agent Patricia Morrison from the Financial Crimes Investigation Unit. The caller identified herself. I'm calling about the illegal transfer attempt and potential fraud related to the property purchase you reported. The formal introduction from a financial crimes investigator confirmed that the irregularities Marcus had identified had escalated to criminal investigation level, meaning Howard and Janet were now facing potential federal charges in addition to state assault prosecution. We've identified multiple violations in how your parents financed your brother's house purchase, Agent Morrison explained, including tax evasion on investment property sale proceeds, gift tax violations, and potential mortgage fraud in the financing application. The comprehensive list of violations suggested that Howard and Janet's attempt to give Travis a nearly $1 million house had involved systematic fraud and tax evasion that would result in serious criminal charges and financial penalties. The property your brother received may be subject to seizure as proceeds of criminal activity, Agent Morrison continued, and your parents are facing potential charges that include tax evasion, mortgage fraud, and conspiracy to commit financial crimes. The revelation that Travis's gift house might be seized as evidence in criminal proceedings was particularly satisfying because it meant their favoritism and violence had resulted not just in assault prosecution, but in losing the very property they had committed crimes to give him. "We'll need your continued cooperation as we build the criminal case," Agent Morrison concluded, "and we expect to be filing formal charges within the next 6 weeks. Once we complete documentation of all financial violations." The timeline for criminal charges meant that Howard would be facing both assault prosecution and federal financial crimes charges simultaneously, creating exactly the kind of comprehensive legal consequences that their violence and fraud deserved. Have you ever watched your parents' violent favoritism trigger criminal investigations that exposed not just assault, but also comprehensive financial fraud that would result in prison sentences and property seizures? The satisfaction of seeing appropriate legal consequences exceeded anything I could have imagined when Howard first slapped me for refusing to sacrifice my earned home. But the final resolution would bring even more dramatic consequences, as the full scope of their illegal activities was exposed and prosecuted through both state and federal criminal proceedings. The permanent transformation of my relationship with family members who had committed assault and financial fraud was completed through comprehensive legal proceedings that resulted in criminal convictions, substantial financial penalties, property seizures, and social consequences that ensured Howard, Janet, and Travis understood the severity of their actions. Howard's criminal prosecution for assault proceeded through state court with overwhelming evidence from 6 witnesses who had observed his violence, resulting in conviction, probation, mandatory anger management classes, and a permanent criminal record that would affect his professional reputation and future background checks. Mr. Sullivan committed premeditated assault after his property demand was refused, the prosecutor argued during sentencing, striking his daughter with sufficient force to cause injury, while multiple family members observed the violence without intervention. The criminal conviction resulted in 2 years of probation, 200 hours of community service, mandatory counseling, and a permanent record that would follow Howard indefinitely, creating exactly the kind of long-term consequences that domestic violence deserves. But the more dramatic legal consequences emerged from the federal financial crimes investigation, which uncovered systematic fraud, tax evasion, and mortgage fraud in how Howard and Janet had financed Travis's nearly $1 million house purchase. Howard and Janet Sullivan evaded approximately $185,000 in capital gains taxes on their investment property sale, federal prosecutors charged, and failed to report a $950,000 gift to their son, violating federal gift tax reporting requirements and tax evasion statutes. The tax evasion charges carried potential prison sentences of up to 5 years, plus substantial financial penalties that would exceed the taxes they had evaded, creating severe consequences for their attempt to avoid legitimate tax obligations. Additionally, the Sullivans committed mortgage fraud by misrepresenting their income and assets on financing applications, prosecutors continued, obtaining approximately $400,000 in mortgage financing through false statements about their financial situation. The mortgage fraud charges were particularly serious because they constituted federal crimes involving financial institutions, carrying mandatory minimum sentences and potential imprisonment of up to 30 years under federal sentencing guidelines. The cumulative effect of the assault conviction and federal financial crimes charges meant that Howard and Janet were facing potential prison sentences, substantial fines, asset seizures, and permanent criminal records that would destroy their reputation and financial security. Travis's situation was equally devastating, as the house he had received as a gift became evidence in federal criminal proceedings and was ultimately seized by federal authorities as proceeds of criminal activity under asset forfeiture laws. The property located at 4782 Elmwood Drive is subject to federal seizure, the forfeiture notice stated, as proceeds of tax evasion and mortgage fraud committed by Howard and Janet Sullivan. The seizure meant that Travis lost the nearly $1 million house he had received just months earlier, learning that property obtained through parental crimes doesn't provide the security or stability he had been expecting. "I didn't know the house was purchased through fraud," Travis claimed during interviews with federal investigators. "My parents just told me they wanted to give me security and home ownership." But Travis's claimed ignorance didn't protect him from losing the property or from the social stigma of being associated with parents whose favoritism had involved systematic criminal behavior to give him advantages he hadn't earned. The 6 family members who had witnessed Howard's assault and remained silent faced their own consequences through subpoenas requiring testimony in criminal proceedings, and social stigma from their failure to intervene or report violence they had observed. Family members who witness domestic violence and fail to report it are complicit in enabling that violence, victim advocates noted, and their silence creates environments where assault is treated as acceptable family conflict resolution. The social consequences for silent witnesses included damaged relationships with me and recognition within extended family that their failure to intervene had made them accessories to violence and fraud that destroyed multiple family relationships. My own life had been transformed by the elimination of toxic family relationships and the vindication provided by criminal convictions and financial penalties that validated my decision to pursue comprehensive legal action rather than accepting family pressure to forgive assault and fraud. Removing violent and criminal family members through prosecution creates space for healthy relationships, my therapist observed. And your refusal to accept assault or fraud as normal family behavior protected both your physical safety and your financial security. The home that had been the focus of my parents' violent demands remained my peaceful sanctuary, protected by restraining orders and the knowledge that Howard, Janet, and Travis could never again make demands on property I had earned through legitimate work. My commercial real estate career continued flourishing, with professional reputation enhanced by industry awareness that I had exposed significant fraud in residential real estate transactions and had cooperated fully with financial crimes investigators. Brooke's integrity in reporting fraud demonstrates the kind of ethical standards we want in commercial real estate professionals, industry colleagues noted, and her willingness to pursue criminal prosecution despite family pressure shows strong character and appropriate boundaries. The professional validation of my legal actions reinforced that protecting yourself through criminal prosecution when family members commit assault and fraud is not just personally necessary but professionally admirable, especially in industries where ethics and legal compliance are fundamental requirements. 2 years after the assault and subsequent criminal proceedings, Howard and Janet had served federal prison sentences for tax evasion and mortgage fraud, while Travis struggled to rebuild life without the house that had been seized and without the parental financial support that had sustained his lifestyle for over a decade. Your parents' criminal behavior taught them consequences they should have learned decades earlier, Sandra observed, and Travis is finally experiencing what life looks like without endless bailouts and gifted property. The long-term consequences of their favoritism, violence, and fraud created exactly the outcome that criminal behavior deserves: imprisonment, financial ruin, social stigma, and permanent separation from the daughter they had assaulted for refusing to sacrifice her earned success. Have you ever watched your parents' violent favoritism result in federal prison sentences, while your sibling lost the nearly $1 million house they had obtained through crimes committed on his behalf? Sometimes the most satisfying revenge is simply ensuring that criminals face appropriate legal consequences, regardless of whether those criminals are your parents. The judge's ruling, the criminal convictions, and the property seizures created exactly the outcome that assault and fraud deserve: comprehensive legal consequences that ensure violent and criminal behavior doesn't get rewarded through victim forgiveness or family loyalty that enables continuing crimes. If this story resonated with you, please hit that subscribe button and share your experiences in the comments below. Remember that parents who assault you for refusing to give up your earned property after giving nearly $1 million to a favored sibling deserve criminal prosecution and comprehensive financial investigation, not understanding or forgiveness. See you in our next story here on Her Sweet Revenge.